All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. Hoping this is recording. Folks that are listening to the recording, I'm sorry this is awkward, but I have almost died because of Drupal. And today, I will tell you how I got to that point. That point is this right here. This is me sitting on the edge of a pickup truck driving down a highway in Haiti, near death. But first off, I always like to start out with, who am I? Why am I here? I'm seller door on Drupal.org. I've been doing Drupal officially on Drupal.org for 8 years and 2 months now. You can find me on the Twitters at TechNerdTeitzel. Feel free to heckle me, do whatever you want there. I'm the founder CEO of Seller Door Media and Locker. We are a web development agency, but we also do security and encryption. Information architect, security specialist, and then I like to call myself a former themer. In a previous life, I did a lot of theming. And fun little fact, I'm actually a third generation tech nerd. My grandpa started at IBM way back when. My dad said, I don't want to be in technology, and he went to be a teacher. And then a couple years later, he started at IBM. He's on his 36th year there. And I grew up coding on computers before I was even in school. And I'm like, I don't want to go do computers. I want to be a doctor. And here I am. So first things first, this session isn't about me. It's about the journey. And that's what I want to share is my journey and how it can translate to yours or the folks that you're interacting with. Whether you're, Drupal Ninja, been here for years and years and years, or if you are brand new to the community, this is kind of something for everybody. And so, as all good journeys, this one is going to start at the beginning. This is my first question ever on Drupal.org. And I really encourage you guys, if you want to now, it's not going to be rude, pull out your laptops, your phones, or whatever. Go to your Drupal.org profile, pull up your first post ever. It's really fun. Like we were having beers at the last meetup, and we were all pulling out our first posts, and it was slightly embarrassing, really awesome, good stories coming out of it. My first one was, if I add a border 10 pixels solid, I get a solid border. But I can't get a clear border around my picture. How do I do that? This is because I got started in Drupal because of Template Monster. I was brand new to all development, or modern development. I'd been doing stuff on old systems, but I needed a website. I was building an app. It was 2009. Everyone was building apps, right? And so I needed a website. And what's the first thing I do? I pull up Template Monster. I find something I like. And there's a lot of things out there that said WordPress, and there's a lot of things out there that said Drupal. I liked one that was Drupal, and so I downloaded it, paid for it, and frankly, it sucked. The experience out of the box, it was Drupal 6. It was hard. I didn't know what it was. I remember emailing people that I knew were in tech. I was like, I'm starting a website on this thing called Drupal. Can you help me? And everyone's like, nah, I don't know what that is. And so I went to the first place I could think of. And I'm like, hey, I just want the words not to hit my pictures. Like, how do I make that look good? And luckily for me, and I was hoping this was going to be a bigger screen, so some of this will be hard reading here, but someone very kindly and gently, actually fairly quickly after I posted it, said, there is no such thing as a clear border. What you're looking for is padding. And so he actually snippeted padding, and here, float left, don't do this, do this, do this, totally helped me with my code. And I was like, awesome, thank you, you're the best, this is awesome. And I got my site out. And so we started looking at and pulling up some of these. And so I posted on Twitter, and I said, go find your first post it back to me, and let me know what it is. This one's fun. This is from Andy, who's here. He's talking in another session right now. And his first post was actually a reply to somebody else, which I think is really cool, in that your first interaction with the Drupal community is helping somebody rather than trying to get help. This person posted that they built a module, but if you have been in Drupal longer than a year and a half, you know that trying to get a module into the Drupal official Drupal.org has been very, very difficult. Multiple steps and months. It took me 8 months, 9 months to be Drupal vetted, which was a process in and of itself. And so this guy just posted it up and said, hey, here's a tarball of it. And he's like, I got 0 posts until 5 years later. Somebody searched it, found it, and was like, awesome, thanks. That's exactly the module I was looking for. So they just kind of side-loaded Drupal.org and did their own thing. This, though, was my favorite. And Jonathan's here, so you can heckle him later on this. But this was the one we had the most fun with, was I upgraded my sites. I'm getting this error, what's going on? And then Dave Reed comes back and says, look at the giant notice on the front page and update. And that's it. It's like, well, you got shut down by Dave Reed on your first post. Welcome to Drupal. Dave's an awesome guy, but it's just one of those fun things to kind of look at and be like, wow, that's kind of, you're posting out there, and the first thing you do to open an issue is go to the page where you don't see the giant banner. So I took that template monstrosity and I installed it, and it didn't look anything like the demo. And I'm like, why doesn't this look like the demo? It's supposed to look like that. I'm supposed to just be able to click and enter content, and this is all going to be fun. And that didn't work. So I finally, duct taped it all together and got it working. And then this was in the final days of Drupal 6. And so I thought I was going to be really cool and go out and build my own theme. And so I took 3 of the most popular things at the time and said, I'm just going to mash them all together. So if anybody remembers Fusion and Aquia Slate and Danland, which was the first theme to feature that like really cool under shadow image that was positioned behind the picture to make it look like it's floating, like Super Web 2.0. So I mashed those all together. It kind of worked. It was awesome. But then I started getting involved in Omega. And this was right around the time when Drupal 7 was coming out. Omega had not yet become very popular. I found that it fit kind of how my brain worked, in that it was GUI based yet codable. I could do some fun things with it. So I got super, super involved in IRC, which is like Slack for us old timers. Well, Slack is IRC, but and so I got super involved in IRC. Back in that time, I was a freelancer. I didn't have a lot of work because obviously I didn't even know how to put a padding around an image. So I had a lot of time on my hands, spent a lot of time in the IRC, and actually met some really, really nice, helpful people there. I didn't know any of the underlying tech that was working on in Omega. I started learning that, but I helped write most of the documentation that's out there for it. And through the process and hanging out in the IRC chat, like I still remember we had one person come in and was like, oh my gosh, I just inherited a Drupal site. It has Omega on it. My manager says I have to have the site done in 2 days, and I don't know what I'm doing. And we felt horrible for this person. They're just like opening their heart out in IRC. And so we actually got them to share their credentials with us. And 2 or 3 of us built the whole site for them in like 2 days for free, just to save their job. And they're like, oh my gosh, I love you guys. This is like the best thing ever. They're trying to send us stuff on Amazon or whatever. It's like, no. Like, this is just what we do. And that was normal in the Omega channel. Like, we just helped people. They came, we helped. And there was this sense of community around it that really built up. And I got confident in Omega, and I kind of knew it. And then Omega started gaining some traction and gaining some more traction. And so what's the first thing I did? I went upstairs and presented. I had never been in the Drupal community. I'd never been to a meetup. I'd never been anywhere. I put in a paper or a submission, and I'm like, I'm going to talk on Omega. And it was kind of the hot new thing at the time. And so I'm up in the big room in front of hundreds of people, my first experience ever in the community, talking about something that I didn't know like the awesomeness that was behind it. I could just tell you how to use it. I remember answering questions that day, and I was just like, I don't know. I'll answer. That's a great question. I'll get back to you. But through all this, and really in my time in like the early IRC channel, I started to learn the come for the code, stay for the community, right? I came for the code not because I was like uber nerd wanting to code really clean, pure, awesome, performant code. I came because I needed the code. And I ended up staying because I found a group of people that actually jived with my mentality, who I was, and how I operate. And so you heard it this morning during the opening time with Mike. This is something that if you haven't experienced it yet, you will. The Drupal community is incredibly unique in that they are helpful beyond belief if you allow them to. And that's why the whole point of this talk is say yes to the Drupal community. It's how do you make that step to get involved? Mine started with this question. I got a bottle of Scotch. You want to join me? Now, we all know this famous comic. This is the Drupal learning curve. You've got WordPress and Joomla kind of plateauing out, and then Drupal has this like backward curve of death with people being crucified, and there's a bulldozer pushing people off. This isn't far from the truth. The Drupal learning curve is incredibly steep, and it is covered and littered with the dead bodies of developers that have tried to do this and failed. And so I always kept this on my computer because it just reminds me of like I somehow like grabbed onto the dead person and swung myself around and somehow got above that cliff. This was the Drupal learning curve that actually Dries posted. And you kind of have this like I suck threshold where you just don't believe in yourself and you're like, I don't know how to do this Drupal thing. And you're like, yeah, I kick ass. And then you're like, chicks at the top. So you go through this period of how do you grow, right? And the hardest part of Drupal is there are a lot of people that sit out here. A lot of people that sit at the top. A lot of really, really smart people in Drupal. I have sat in conversations with folks where it's like, I'm chewing on words because I just can't understand what's going on. They're speaking at levels that I will never understand. And so I always felt like I was down here. And it wasn't until I started getting involved in Drupal that I had an experience like this, where Batty's first experience was Drupal Con Amsterdam, and Dries, the founder of Drupal, walks up and says, hey, how are you guys doing? You don't experience that in other communities. You don't have that connectedness with the folks that are the hive minds at the top and the folks that are just starting. And I find that interesting. Like you can go to an event like this, you can go to a Drupal Con, you can go to a Meetup, and you can be sitting next to somebody and they're like, oh yeah, I built views. And you're like, oh, wait a second, like you just built something that like everybody and their mother uses, and they're just sitting there having a coffee and you're just talking with them. And most of the time, you don't know who the person is you're talking to. And so if you're a Drupal veteran, seek out people that aren't as confident. Seek out those beginners because you were one once. This I saw recently, it's the Pacman Rule. I think it's super cool. If you're ever in a group of people, always leave like a Pacman mouth open. And that lets somebody who's kind of straggling along, we've always seen that where you kind of like step in and just like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be part of this conversation. Some of the best conversations I've been in because I've been the guy that steps into the Pacman mouth, right? So always leave some space to come in and be inviting to folks. Remember your first time at your conference and how awkward that was, where you would go to a session and 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 then go to your room. And then go to a session, go to a session, go to dinner. Like it was just, very structural. And then if you're going out for the night, bring someone. One of the most favorite things I do is I find somebody at a conference and I say, hey, follow me tonight. We're going to have some fun. And you never know where that leads. New to the Drupal community? Don't be afraid. It's intimidating. The learning curve is steep. But sit down, code, drink, eat. You're going to meet some wonderful people. You're going to meet some really cool people that have done some absolutely amazing things in their life. And all you have to do is sit down and start coding and talking. You don't even have to be coding good. You can be trying to put solid borders around pictures. Most everybody you meet in Drupal are kind. And it's kind of creepy the first couple times you experience it. You're like, these people are way too nice. Like there's something going on here. Like maybe they're spiking the coffee with some like hallucinogenic something. I don't know what. But everyone here just likes to talk to each other. And they just work. And I always had a hard time trying to explain that to folks of how do you describe an open source community, right? And if you're the least bit extroverted, go to a dinner, go to the happy hours, go to the parties, the after parties, the after parties, and the sunrise parties. And it isn't about the parties, it's about the time to be together. If you have that inkling, go out and do it. If you don't, that's fine. There's sprint rooms, there's times to be in like small, more intimate environments. And it's not about the party, it's about the people. Yes, we like to call Drupal Brupal because we drink. But it's really because I look at Drupal cons and Drupal summits as like a family reunion. I get to go back for the few times a year and actually be with a group of people that I'm really good friends with and have a good time. So it's like going and having a college reunion a couple times a year. My first experience with this was very, very different. The first ever tech conference I went to was WWDC 2010, which was the famous one where Steve Jobs failed his keynote. I got to watch that whole meltdown live. It was awesome. If you've ever seen Steve Jobs' look of glare in person, like death look, it's scary. But I went to WWDC 10. It was awesome. It was this big event, lights, Steve Jobs, iPhone 4s. Like, we didn't know what was going on. But what was really interesting is like standing in the line for the keynote, which was hours upon hours long. You get to talking to people. What are you working on? Stuff. What are you working on? Stuff. Nobody would share what they're working on because in 2009, 2010, you were all competitors. If I could do my widget better than you, then my app was going to be successful and yours wasn't. And there was this high sense of competition to the point where you would go to a session and it wasn't people in the community presenting, it was Apple employees presenting to make you a better developer. And then you would have to book your time with an Apple developer to go answer your questions, but you never talked to other attendees. It was just your way of interacting with Apple. And that's great. There's some very powerful things that happen there. But the other thing that was fun to experience, but also very contrasting, was they do a trivia night. And up on stage are like Apple employee number 5. And like these are like single-digit Apple employees. And the questions are like, if you're transmitting iOS 6 across a 14.4 modem, how long would it take? Like weird questions, right? Like what's the first Intel chip ever in a Apple? And it was a keyboard that was produced in the late 80s and stuff like that. But it was always like you and Apple. It was never you and the people next to you, right? Fast forward to DrupalCon Portland, and that was my second DrupalCon that I went to. First one was Denver. But in Portland, I finally caught that stride of this is what a community is like. You go to a session and there are people who are doing the same job you are telling you how they do their job. And I had to explain to some of the backers of my company, like, I'm going to go to a conference and tell them my secret stuff that I do to make them do that secret stuff. And they're like, don't. Like, why do you do that? And so DrupalCon Portland, I had a great time. We were talking. We were out hanging out. I'm on my way walking back to the hotel. It's about 1 o'clock at night. And there's another guy that's walking kind of down the same sidewalk. And we both realize we're going to the same Motel 8. Both wearing Drupal gear. And he goes, hey, I have some Scotch. You want to join? And it being 12 o'clock on like a Wednesday afternoon or a Wednesday evening, I'm like, sure, why not? What could be wrong about somebody offering you Scotch on the street of Portland at 12 o'clock at night? And I like Scotch. So we go back to his room. We pour some Scotch. We end up hanging out till like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm complaining about, I hate this about Drupal, and I can't stand this, and I wish Drupal would just change this. And we're going back and forth. And he was really very intelligent, having great conversations. And then come to find out the next day, I was like, yeah, that's the guy on stage that I was talking to. And it was Alex Pott, who, if you've been in Drupal, is one of the core committers for Drupal 8, and this was, or Drupal 7 in Drupal 8. And this was right when 8 was starting to get envisioned. And I was sitting here bitching to the person who's writing like 3/4 of core about all my issues. And I had no idea who I was talking to until like the next day. And I was like, that's the guy I was drinking with last night. And they're like, yeah, he's one of the core committers. So I was like, oh, that's cool. But to me, like that wraps up Drupal in like a nutshell. Like you go somewhere, you have this awesome experience of drinking Scotch at 2 o'clock in the morning at someone's hotel room, and it's a core contributor. And I have commit rights to core. Like it's not something that gets boasted about, right? And so when asked by a stranger to hang out, say yes. Obvious stranger danger caveat, like don't say yes to everybody. There are times when you want to say no. But I've always told folks, if you really want to get involved in Drupal, say yes. Some of the conversations I've had, hey, you want to go out? We're going to just head down to the hotel lobby and have a beer. Sure, sounds good. And then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 core committers show up, and all of a sudden we're talking about caching in like BigPipe, and how do we get BigPipe to be more performant and stuff. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know any of this, but this is really fun. Like, I'm a wallfly on a conversation that's going to impact the future of Drupal, right? And all it took was me saying yes. And so after I talked at my first ever experience, after I went to a couple of Drupal cons, I found out you guys do this every month. And so I found my local meetup, Seattle Drupal User Group. CDUG is what we call it. And I learned that there was more than just conferences in Drupal. There is a community of folks that get together every month and do this. To me, that was awesome, because at the time I was a freelancer. I was working out of a home office. My best friend was my dog that would sleep on my foot, and I didn't interact with people except for in IRC. So all of a sudden you go to like a human meetup and you're like, oh my gosh, how do I interact with people? What do I do? And so I encourage you, find your local meetup. If you're a freelancer like I was, I always tell people it's a business write-off where I get to go have dinner with my friends, and I feel like I actually have coworkers. Like this is my time to go meet up with coworkers and enjoy being with people. We do new topics every week. We used to do something like Stump the Chumps, where new people would come in and be like, I can't figure this out. Like, I'm trying to put solid borders around my pictures. And then people would kindly come in and be like, yes, no, this is how it's done. Great networking and business connections. I've found some of the best opportunities for my career through my local meetup. We become this tight group of people that know each other's skills and abilities and how to interact and work with each other, and then you end up working like coworkers, and you become coworkers. And did I mention friends? Like, they're friends. Like, they're people that I go hang out with, and I would hang out with them outside of Drupal. Are you a longtime Drupal ninja? Go to a meetup. It's not below you. Present what you're working on, what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. One of the things that we always start off our Seattle Drupal user group with is, what module are you most pissed off with right now? And it's really fun, because you have, like, beginners are like, I can't understand views, and then you have experienced people like, I hate views, and then you realize, oh, there's no difference in what level you are. Like, everyone hates views at some point. Offer some advice and take some. Like, just because you're a Drupal ninja and you think you're awesome at it, you still have the ability to learn from your peers. I always like to, if I can, unfortunately I live far away now, but go early and co-work, stay late and hang out. It's just a lot of fun. And then take time to give back. Present, like I said, be part of it. We organize some like beginner days or events where it's like small camps or meetups, or go have a ski trip or whatever. Through that, I met this guy, Mike. This is really cool. This was during the whole dust up that we had in the community recently. It says, if none are selected, all are allowed. And that's actually a comment in views that he found and made a shirt of to go to Drupal Con with. But you meet people like this that walk through life with you and teach you all sorts of stuff that you don't really know the impact of until they're gone. So this summit is just step one. You've made it here. Now go to a meetup. Continue that experience. Go find some other folks to be with. Now, during this, as I was putting this all together, there was a thread on Twitter called that someone started. Fatima, if anybody of you have met her, awesome gal. And she said, hey, what's your community moment? And this was really fun, because as I was prepping this, it's like, you just did my talk for me. This is really cool. But what was really fun was you start getting some really OG Drupal folks replying to it. And again, unfortunately, it's shortened down. But Ken Rickard, who's been around Drupal for a long, long time, he talks about going to a barbecue in DrupalCon Denver, and renting a van and piling 8 people in it and going to this barbecue, and Dries is there. And then Dries replies later, he's like, yeah, that was actually one of my favorite events of that too. And people are like, yeah, I remember that too. DrupalCon San Francisco, where somebody sat down in a co-working space, and it ended up turning into this long co-coding session. Again, probably didn't know it at the beginning, but he was working with Merlin and Earl Miles and Eclipse, who again are these longtime contributors that they just sit down and they'll code with you, right? Some more fun ones were meeting up people at the first Drupal Delphia, and how people's humility floored Adam. I totally agree. Again, the Sunnyvale dinner, the barbecue. I thought this one was cool when I felt my voice being heard and when people voted for me because I became the first at-large director. That's the one really interesting thing about Drupal is that it's community run. It's by the people, for the people. And I always try to explain people open source. And this goes back to my transition from iOS to Drupal. And it's like, how do you transition from closed source to open source? And I had to tell people, open source is like communism for code, but it works. Like communism in real life doesn't really work. Communism in code actually does. Like we all are better because we share everything, and there is no, person better than the other. And so we have this committee of folks that run it, and an association of folks that run it, but they are the community. It's not this overlord-bearing enterprise that gives you access to their SDK that you can then use. It is a community of people saying we're all going to do really cool things together and teach each other how to do it, and in the process we're all going to prosper. And people getting involved in the issue queues and becoming a module co-maintainer. WebChick, who unfortunately can't be here this weekend. I was hoping to hear her talk later. And she's talking about Drupal 4.7 and how they were rewriting the API at the last minute. And then you have Eaton and Earl and everyone popping in being like, yeah, that was hell. Like 4.7 was really hard, right? You've got folks talking about Drupal Con Portland taking hikes, going on like extracurricular activities. I really encourage people to go out and find these. But this one caught me. It said, I haven't had one yet, and I've been in Drupal for 10 years. And that to me said, we're not doing our job. Like, as the Drupal community, this is what we want to avoid. It's our job as people experienced in Drupal who've been here in the community, who are fostering this environment, to seek out the people who've had 10 years of no interaction in Drupal, who haven't had that community moment yet, and finding out what it is to do that. And then this was the perfect reaction, is like, we should change that. Let's hang out. There's trivia night. I'm hoping for a game night. There's a whole bunch of ideas, and it's just what, maybe it's not exactly what this person is looking for in the Drupal community, but finding that, seeking out that person who hasn't had that Drupal experience yet. So going back to the first slide, what does this have to do with me almost dying? The first Drupal Con I ever went to, after like the Drupal high of the Pacific Northwest Drupal Summit, I went to DrupalCon Denver, and there was a hackathon there for a company called Troppo. And at the time, Troppo was this startup that was doing SMS messaging, and they wanted people in Drupal to basically build them an integration to Drupal and called it a hackathon. And so, so I had been talking with a buddy of mine, and he's like, hey, I want to start this program, and I'm going to build it, and I have this guy who's building it for me, and it's all built in like Microsoft Excel and Access and all this stuff. And I was like, no! It's like, let me build it in Drupal. I don't know anything about it, but it's really going to be cool. And so then my first step was, I'm going to go to that hackathon and recruit some people to build me the thing that I can't know how to build. And then we ended up winning. And what we built at that Denver DrupalCon was using views and views proximity filter, the ability to post a node and SMS somebody within a message radius of that node. Pretty fun, pretty cool. There were some interesting things, like we were doing like zombie alerts and stuff like that, right? The true purpose of this was that shortly thereafter, the earthquake in Haiti happened. And we were, we had decided, or no, the earthquake had happened prior. We had built this platform to go into the response of the Haitian earthquake. And our idea was to take this SMS messaging platform, and go down to Haiti and allow aid workers to be able to communicate with each other via SMS because they didn't have the ability to actually talk. There weren't very much landlines, and they had like limited internet access. So they could get on, post, and it would SMS everywhere. I flew down, and being right after the Haitian earthquake and me being completely naive, I go to the terminal and they're like, sorry, we don't have any room for you on the airplane. And I'm like, you don't get it. I'm a tall redhead white guy in Port-au-Prince. Like, this is the most dangerous spot in the world at this time. And they're like, yeah, sorry, the next flight's out in 3 days. And so I go to the airport, or the airline lounge. They actually locked me in there because they were afraid of people trying to kill me. They told me if I left that door, I would die. I somehow got onto their Wi-Fi password because it was very insecure. Skyped my friend who was where I was supposed to go, and he's like, I got it. There's a couple guys that are going to come pick you up. They're on a motorcycle, and they'll be there in about 30 minutes. And we hang up, and then I realize, did he just say motorcycle? And sure enough, this little 100cc motorcycle rolls up with 2 dudes on it. And I hop in the middle with all my luggage and everything, and we're like racing through Port-au-Prince, and I have no idea who these people are. I've already been told I'm going to be killed already. We get to this compound. It's like massive compound, and this woman is like the godfather of Port-au-Prince. She has like everything super nice. There's a Land Rover parked out front. When I asked her what she did for work, she said work. I left it at that. I didn't ask any more questions. That night she gave me her room, which was like very, very gracious. But she then again said, you can sit on the balcony and look out across Port-au-Prince, but if you leave that wall, you'll die. I'm like, there's a theme here that I'm starting to pick up on. The next morning, they hopped me over to the bus stop at 6 o'clock in the morning, popped me on the Optimiste, which I was optimistic would keep me alive. And I was on an 8-hour bus ride from what would normally take us about 2 hours here in the States. 8-hour bus ride across the hills of Haiti. That thing didn't really have brakes. The engine broke down a couple times. The brakes were the horn, like just honking at people so that they could get out of the way as we're like screaming down these mountain roads. And when I arrived at the other end, you can't see it because of the lights here. This is the face of somebody who's just like, I'm happy to be alive and where I'm supposed to be. You can kind of see some like dirt and dust on my face. That's diesel soot because I was in the very back seat because they didn't want me to be seen. Coming to talk to the locals, they're like, yeah, we don't even ride that bus. Like, that's the most dangerous thing in Haiti. And I was like, awesome, I rode on it for 8 hours. In that time, this is actually the second trip back to Haiti. I decided to skip the buses and start going into pickup trucks, which were slightly more safe. But we ended up partnering with medical folks down there that were distributing medicine to the clinics, and the clinics were using the platform to talk to each other and communicate and start to work together. And I kind of sit there and think like, wow, all because I decided to speak at a summit, which got me excited on Drupal, to go to a Drupal Con that got me excited to go to a hackathon. Now we're in Haiti delivering medicine, and this is all because somebody in Omega gave me a chance in an IRC channel. And I think that's kind of cool. Luckily, I did get the flight back. The pilots literally did roll down their windows. This is like an ex-Soviet jet, or not jet, it was a plane. Flew barely above the hills. I've never been in such a sketchy thing. What you don't see between this picture and this picture is the tropical storm that came in while we were riding in the back of said pickup truck about 60 miles an hour down the Haitian highways. Time number 2, I almost died. And we've since taken that platform from Haiti and went to Washington, D.C., and it's now distributing SMS alerts for people experiencing homelessness in Washington, D.C. So they sign up for the platform, and then service providers can say, hey, we have soup kitchen opening up, free medical or free legal. And the most powerful one has been the D.C. government has hopped on and started doing SMS alerts around hypo and hyperthermia. And people have actually come to us and said, you've saved our lives because we got that text message. And I'm sitting there going, again, all because I bought a template monster theme. Like, I do this again to say, the path that you're taking in Drupal now, you can do stuff like this. It's not outside our realm to take these small experiences that we have and string them together to the point where we're going out and impacting lives and going out and making a difference in our community. So I encourage you to find what it is. Like, have you said yes to Drupal yet. And if you haven't, find that time. Find those experiences that you can then string together and go make a difference. Go make a difference in this community. Go make a difference in the world. Do something, because you're gifted with this brain that can do crazy, awesome things. Go use it, right? And so with that, we can open it up for some discussion, some kibitzing and stories about the Drupal community if you want, but most of all, go enjoy the summit. Find me. I'll be having dinner and drinks later. I'll be happy to talk more. Thank you. Questions, thoughts, comments? If not, we've got a little bit of time for coffee later. So,
what's the SMS platform?
So I kind of glossed over that whole part. So Troppo was the SMS platform that we used it's basically an API that you hit and say, send this message to this number, and it'll just send it for you. Yeah. Troppo ended up getting bought by a small company called Oracle, who then sucked them in and built them into what they're doing. And it's actually been really cool. The DC stuff is now sponsored by Oracle, and Troppo have gotten involved and basically said you have as much text messaging as you ever want. IEEE is involved, which is kind of like the standards board for everything electrical. And so they provide that platform for us. And it's still running. It's updating Drupal 8 soon, but still running some of the OG code that we wrote at that summit back in 2012 it uses Vue's proximity filter. It's horribly inefficient, but it just pops out a list of users that are located in that area with their phone number, and then we just iterate through each one of those and send them an SMS message. So again, kind of a fun way to hack together something that you do in Drupal with views, and then you can locate people, and then you take the node and all sorts of fun stuff from that. We actually introduced, because of Haiti and then some of the work in DC, a taxonomy structure as well, so people can watch categories. So they're not just getting blasted with everything. They're like, I want only things on Veterans Affairs, or I want only hypothermia alerts. So they can kind of pick and choose what they want to listen to. But at the core of it, it's all Drupal.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Actually, just something kind of not the exact same, but it was in I think it was in Jordan, and people they'd actually send an SMS to a phone, which would then hit our server and create a node on a map, basically. And it was for doing just any sort of what is that?
Like crisis mapping, or
yeah. Essentially crisis.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. There's a platform called Ushahidi that was coming out around the same time. For some reason, we're like, yeah, we could do it in Drupal. Why use a platform that's built for it? It does a very similar thing that you can text into it and kind of show where things are at. That was the end goal concept in Haiti, was that we were going to have two-way SMS, but trying to get a Haitian phone number that people can text to and all that is more difficult than you think of. Yeah.
One smartphone that people,
yeah.
I don't think it's still good.
But that's the fun thing about Drupal, and I think that's the fun thing about the Drupal community, especially as I've started traveling the world and interacting with folks all over the world in Drupal, is that you kind of come up with this harebrained idea, and you're like, we could do it in Drupal, why not? And then you end up building it and launching it and doing stuff. I remember the first time I was at Pacific Northwest Drupal Summit, Occupy Wall Street was going on in the park over there, and folks got together and were like, we're going to hack a whole site for Occupy Wall Street, and the next day they had this Occupy Wall Street website up and running, and it's just kind of that social activism, and I think the powerful thing about the Drupal community is that it's because of our sense of community in the code, it extends into real life as well. We have this innate sense of we're going to help somebody else next to us because we can. So yeah, that's cool.
Hi.
Hey.
So I've been involved in Drupal for a few years now, and interested in the community. I think the challenge that I have personally is that it's definitely very heavy for developers.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that development is a big part of it, but there's also a lot of other roles of Drupal. There's project managers, there's designers, there's testers, content specialists, and sometimes I feel like you know, you go to meetings, but then sometimes it's kind of, or just doing code, and you're sitting there like, okay, I'm involved, but, you know.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I have to like volunteer to
Right.
show other things.
Right. Totally.
But then that could be interesting for all the devs in the room. But what's been your experience? You've been in Drupal longer than me. I've been doing it for like 4.5 years. Of the other non-developer types who go to these things.
Totally. I was that non-developer type. I always tell folks, fake it till you make it. So act like you belong, and you do. That's kind of the cool thing about Drupal is there's like no credentials at the door. It's not like they're like checking how many commits you have before you can get into certain parties or anything. And so, yeah, I think the powerful thing about the Drupal community is that you do have this kind of like hive mind of really, really smart people. And they're actually very approachable, and they want to talk about some of those other topics. They just don't get an opportunity to. It takes some effort on your end to kind of get over that feeling of imposter syndrome and kind of, I don't belong here. Why should I be sitting at a table with Dries, or why should I be sitting at a table with, you know, X? And then you kind of realize like, no, I have something to give to this as well. I do think that that's something that us as a Drupal community could work on more. In the last couple of years, I've been getting more and more involved in WordPress, and it's like night and day difference. I go to WordPress and I'm like, Git. Everyone's like, what are you talking about? And it's like, all right, like we're gonna dial this down a bit. It's not that way, and I'm sorry for everyone recording if you're listening to WordPress. I love you guys. But there is this dichotomy there, and there's and you talk to folks in either community, and it's true. WordPress people say we lack in the technical talks and the technical discussions a lot of the times, but they do a really, really good job of telling folks, hey, this is how you structure content or put content, or this is what people want to see on your websites. Us as Drupal, we get so involved in the minutia of how do we make a view more performant, or can that code be rewritten 20 different times, that we lose sense of, and Dwayne's talking about this tomorrow, is like we lose sense of what we're building, and we're just coding to code. And so I would say if you're experiencing that, bring those experiences in. They're valuable, they're necessary, and it's important to kind of round off the conversation. Tech nerdiness is fun, but it's also, like, at least for me, very like mentally straining. Like I have to have those breaks where it's like, okay, I'm not thinking about garbage collection on, you know, caching and weird stuff, right? I need those mental breaks. And so, yeah, I think there's a space for it all. I'm excited that Drupal cons are starting to get like 20 different tracks instead of like, are you a dev or a dev or a dev? Here's talks for you, right? So that to me is showing that we're starting to make steps in that way. And I honestly think that it would be really fun to throw an open source conference with WordPress and Drupal at the same event, which is like, I'll get burned at the stake for in some places in Drupal. But I think it would be really fun because you would get kind of the both ends of the spectrum, and I think there's a lot that both communities can learn from each other. So yeah, I would say just keep getting involved, and there's always a spot. And the other thing is that sometimes some of the most profound things come from somebody who's just like, have you guys thought about it this way? And it's because you have that complete outsider idea that you can be like, oh, that is brilliant, and you're like, I know that because I'm smart. But it's one of those things where it's just like your idea could break that mental block for somebody, and so it's very valuable.
Well, thanks for the points, because my role is I focus mostly on the end user.
Right.
You know, what are the user needs, and how do we build and structure the page, and then the biggest thing, how do we maintain this? You know,
right.
devs build the stuff and then they're gone.
Right.
And you're dealing with the day-to-day of like trying to maintain a page and trying to expand it beyond what was originally thought of what they needed.
Totally.
Like, wow, you built this only to 2 things, but now we need 4.
Totally.
And so to me, it's like user experience is key. I think development is more like to support that, to be able to meet that end user's goals, and what development is important. But also, and I know we used to have a track for UX.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think at a previous summit,
Yep.
we had like a UX track.
Yep, there's a lot of UX UI. It tends to skew more towards the theming and just like how to build cool themes and how to like not put solid borders around your images and stuff. But yeah, I think the user experience is more an afterthought a lot of the times. And I'm guilty of it myself. I get into the code, I get into the architecture, and I'm thinking of like, oh, I can draw these lines in between these two entities, and what if I field this in a certain way? And then I forget, like, that person just wants a button to click to do that. Like, they don't care about the underneath. We care about that, and that's what makes us unique. But at the end of the day, it boils up to that. And I think part of my hope in trying to expand the community and get more people involved is to bring in some of that new mentality, that new thought that I think that we tend to lack at times. And so that's kind of been the interesting thing for me going back and forth between the communities, is seeing that difference and trying to be like, yes, we can all live together. Like, this is really fun. So, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I feel we're aging as a community.
We are.
And I'm wondering if, like, just the highly technical nature of these types of conferences are a detriment to that respect. Because, like, how do we...
Yeah, definitely.
I know some who didn't come for that specific reason.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't find enough relevant sessions for them, and I was like, I'm coming anyway.
Totally.
But
yeah,
that was a deterrent for some people who are not as code heavy.
Totally. And it's that's the other fun thing about the Drupal community and being involved in it over the last 8 years is I started Drupal when I was 23, 24, somewhere in there. Just married, no kids, I have a dog. I now have 2 kids, a dog, a house. Like, I've grown up in, like, I've gone from my, trying to adult to adulting in Drupal, and you see folks kind of grow with that. And I think that, yeah, the community has, and Jared mentioned it earlier, kind of that, like, original Drupal feel. I think some of that does tend to get missing because Drupal it's big time now. Like, we're building websites for what used to be the president, and like there are some major things going on in Drupal, and as it continues to grow and everyone gets aged in life and in their careers, and we all start to go do cool things, you do have to have that backfill, and it does. I think it does get a little too technical, and it gets a little too we as a community don't Pacman enough. Like, we don't, and that's what was really fun about Drupal 8 was us finally saying, like, yes, we can incorporate other people's code, and this isn't going to kill us. Like, that's something that is missing, that I think we can start to get back for sure. But again, it's up to us at summits like this to make that happen. And so, and there are other events too that I think are popping up that are more front end oriented, that don't have to be a technology specific type thing. So, yeah.
I'd go one step further even, as a long-time member of the community. I find it's more teams.
Mm-hmm.
Drupal 8 has become a big site kind of tool,
Mm-hmm.
and big sites are built by big teams. And you look at the other panels that are on just in this time session, and others, it's like, how do I build the team, how do you use Docker to do whatever. Virtual machines, it's all about like shooting up lots and lots and lots of websites instead of those of us who have to maintain sites for a long period of time. It's like we've been losing our freelancers and our standalone people, our designers that used to be around in Drupal 5, the standalone designers, the hobbyists back in the day.
Yep.
They're all gone now.
Right.
I can't even find a freelancer.
Right.
So it's like, is everybody a team now? And why people?
Well, and so I started out as a freelancer, and then it became like, oh crap, I have too much work to do, and that was all because my name got put on the Omega page, and then all of a sudden it's like, there's 80,000 sites using this, and they see my name on it, and they're like, Chris needs to do this, and I'm like, I don't have enough time in my day to do this, so I go hire one person, and then I go hire another person, and now I have a team, right? I do think that there was that kind of freelancer, we can hack it, we can do it on our own mentality, and Drupal has grown up in that sense. But I think that's kind of what made Drupal cool. That was like OG Drupal was this kind of, again, counterculture. I don't have to be part of this Borg I can go do things. And I was talking to some folks before this, and what's really cool is like I still work on really large sites with a team of like 3 people. And you look at it and you're like, that site has millions upon millions of views and it's doing all this crazy stuff. And there's 3 people hacking behind it. So while it may not be like a freelancer specific, I still think that there's this mentality in Drupal that you can do a lot with a little. And again, there's some really, really smart people that have been in the community for a while. But the other thing coming from a business angle of it, I was always shocked, like, why is there no, especially in the Pacific Northwest, there was like no large Drupal shop here. And I would always try to explain it to folks. It's like, the Seattle user group is just a bunch of really smart freelancers who all get together and we just kind of like work on projects together and then we break off and then we work on another project over here and break off and stuff. And that was just kind of the mentality of it. I think that can't last forever because the lifestyle of a freelancer can be stressful at times, and so there is joy in being on a team. Let me put it that way. But I think that's what led to Backdrop and a lot of the other movements of saying we need to keep kind of this more original Drupal feel there. And yeah, Drupal 8 it's tough. Like it's not it's very difficult to be like, I'm going to go build my own Drupal 8 site and maintain it myself and be successful in it. And recently I spun up a WordPress site for somebody who's like, I just need a WordPress site and I need it fast. I downloaded a theme builder and I started having flashbacks of Theme Monster, and it was beautiful. Like the whole site built itself in 5 minutes, and I'm sitting there going, this is the experience that Drupal needs. Not I need a code base, 20 servers, a composer workflow with Circle CI and all this stuff. That feeds our technical side of our minds. But at the end of the day, it's that button that needs to be clicked, and it's that simple site that needs to be made. So I think we can get there. I think we can still keep that going, but it has to be an effort. Like it's not. I don't think it's the focus of folks anymore, unfortunately.
I wanted to add to that. I'm a freelancer, but I work with other freelancers. We kind of work on teams in a way, but we're all still freelancers. Like we're all like we kind of work on this team and work on that team. And I've noticed that. Like I work with different freelancers. And everything, but they just work on different projects, and there always tends to be some team that.
Back in my early days of Drupal, I thought up this, like I was still on that, like, we're communism for code, we can do this, and I was like, we're going to build a co-op of freelancers who are going to, like, where nobody owns anything, everyone owns everything, and we're going to go work on it, and it just never happened because we're all freelancers and we don't actually work on teams together that well. But it was that idea of, I think there is kind of a lone wolf identity in that, but it prevents you from working with others. And I've found a ton of joy in working in teams with people because I get to learn from other folks that it's like I'll never have the opportunity to work with somebody that smart, so I'll hop on a team that works with them. So awesome. I think we are out of time, or we've got like 2 minutes left. So thank you guys for coming, and we'll see you around.